Smoking is really good for you and has many health benefits, including aiding digestion, soothing the throat, reducing a buildup of mucus, and being an absolute cure for ailments such as asthma, bronchitis, hay fever, and influenza. Wait, hang on a minute. That doesn't sound too right, does it? Okay, no, in all seriousness, did you know that everything I just mentioned was genuine advice given in the 20th century by medical professionals and doctors? Pretty scary to imagine, right? I even remember thinking as a kid, hang on, if smoking is so bad for you, how come cigarettes exist? And even more so, why are tobacco companies allowed to sell something that is allegedly proven to be extremely harmful for people's health? I always used to think, quite naively, literally right up until the point I was researching this video, that, it must have just been the poor people of the past. They didn't know any better and what they were putting into their bodies. But you know what? I was completely wrong, and the truth is actually a lot darker. In today's video, we're going to be covering the lies told by Big Tobacco, and the rather scary tactics I bet you've never heard of before that they use to get you hooked. The history of smoking starts back as early as 500 BC in the Americas, when it was used in shamanistic rituals. In the 16th century, wealthy men across Europe used to smoke in tobacco pipes, whereas the working class would chew tobacco. Cigarettes were then created and originally sold as an expensive handmade luxury item for the elites. In the 19th century, cigarette production machines were invented, and this is when the consumption of cigarettes exploded due to the endless possibilities of mass production. Over time, cigarettes have lost their popularity due to the increased knowledge of its health risks, as well as the fact that smoking is no longer seen as a classy, upper-class hobby, but rather a dirty, stinking habit. Despite what most people think, including myself before I started researching this video, the notion that smoking is bad for you is actually not breaking news. As early as 1798, physicians such as Benjamin Rush claimed that using tobacco negatively impacted health, and in 1912, American doctor Isaac Adler was the first to strongly suggest that lung cancer was related to smoking. However, now we're in the 21st century, and research suggests that despite most people knowing the harm of smoking, most smokers want to quit, and more than 80% of regular smokers began smoking before they even reached the age of 18. We like to think of ourselves as creatures of free will, so how did we even get to this point? Well, let me tell you, it is no coincidence. The tobacco industry spends billions on its advertising, marketing, and PR. And on top of that, they ensure that each cigarette alone contains enough nicotine to keep people hooked. The fact of which turned out to be a major conspiracy theory, which I will get onto later on in the video. Their tactics are very unethical and immoral, but the scary thing is it's clever and it ultimately worked. No one was safe when it came to the tobacco industry's advertising, especially not children back in the day who used to be bombarded with subliminal messages to smoke. Examples of this include the cigarette brand Camel. Can't believe I've just done this, but I'm literally so embarrassed. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. But when I was researching this video, I came across this creator and he was calling this brand of cigarettes Camel cigarettes. And as I'm watching this back editing, I'm like, hang on a minute. Are they Camel cigarettes? Because it's spelt camel and the logo is a camel. Yeah, they are Camel cigarettes. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. They use cartoon characters appealing to children, such as Joe Camel, to look cool on their packaging. One 1991 study found that Joe Camel was at least as well known as Mickey Mouse among 3 to 6 year olds. Tobacco companies also started campaigns in magazines and newspapers to encourage people to smoke, using characters such as Dr. Penguin for cools. Dr. Penguin is seen saying things like, menthol is good for you in magazines. And the aim was to make people believe that cigarettes actually soothe the throat instead of damaging it. As sick and twisted as it is, the tobacco industry knew that if they targeted the young, people would have a lifelong dependency on cigarettes, as it's much harder to give up smoking when you've been addicted to it for years. There was also rumours at this time that smoking might have been not as healthy as they were suggesting. So with the older customers getting sick from smoking, and this is really sick and twisted to say, but they were targeting young generations so that when the older generation is no longer with us, possibly even from the harms of smoking, this would ensure that they had a constant stream of new customers. And not just new customers, but customers that would be addicted and dependent on their product for life. In the early 20th century, smoking was seriously frowned upon in women. As the century progressed, so did women's desire for equality. In the awakening of the suffragette movement, tobacco companies used the political climate to their advantage. By appealing to a wider market, they would have more money in the bank. Companies started to create products specifically designed for women. In 1925, Marlboro was introduced as a brand of women's cigarettes with the slogan, "Mild as May," appearing as a delicate cigarette, which was a less aggressive form of smoking than the typical men's cigarette. cigarette. Lucky Strikes also cashed in on this movement, using prominent women such as Amelia Earhart to promote their cigarettes. Times really haven't changed this much either, and even, back in 1925, there was such a push on women to remain slim. Back in 1925, cigarettes were the solution, and brands such as Lucky Strikes challenged women to reach for a Lucky instead of reaching for a sweet. There was one fella in particular who had probably the biggest impact in the whole tobacco industry's marketing campaigns. I mean, if you work in PR or relations, honestly, morality aside for a minute, do take notes, because he was called the father of public relations for a reason. The daddy of PR was a man called Edward Bernays. He was credited for many things over his career, including tricking the American public into thinking that the all-American breakfast was eggs and bacon, and that this was a healthy way to start the day, even though research nowadays kind of contradicts that. But he was hyping up the meat industry, and he ultimately did a good job, because even to this day, that is seen as, the staple breakfast. He was hired by the tobacco industry in the 20th century to get people to smoke more. Bernays was deeply interested in psychology in advertising and promotions. He knew that animals are herd animals, and he was using concepts like crowd psychology before anyone else was. He was a bit of an Epo baby in the sense that he had an inside knowledge on the workings of psychoanalysis, because his double uncle was none other than the famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. I did look up what double uncle means, and to be honest, it means exactly what you think it means. If you are interested, his mother was Freud's sister Anna, and his father was the brother of Freud's wife Martha. He had many successful campaigns to get the general public to start smoking more, especially women. During the 1929 Easter Parade in New York, he paid women to smoke publicly. He also hired his own photographers to make sure that they got good pictures of the women smoking. Playing into the rather liberal New York mentality, women were told to join the march and chant, "Women, light another torch of freedom, fight another sex taboo." When the photos were released, they shocked the general public, because up until this time, women were only permitted to smoke in certain areas, such as the privacy of their own home. This campaign led women to see smoking as a liberation and a way to ultimately stick it to the man. Campaigns like this were obviously successful, because in 1923, only 5% of cigarettes purchased were by women, and by the end of 1929, this raised to 12% of cigarettes. In 1934, Bernays was hired by Lucky Strikes to tackle the issue that women were apparently quite reluctant to buy their cigarettes because of their green and red packaging, and they were concerned that this clashed with typical women fashion trends at the time. Bernays suggested that Lucky Strikes change the packaging to a sort of more neutral colour, which was a bit more fashionable at the time for women. However, George Washington Hill, the head of the American Tobacco Company, refused to change the packaging, saying that they had just spent millions on an advertising campaign using that packaging. Bernays just would not take no for an answer, and honestly, this bit, I just could not believe it as I was reading it, because I was like, the influence and the genius that this man is, it's actually kind of alarmingly scary. He literally just went about it and went, okay, if I can't change your packaging to fit the fashion trends, I'm just going to single-handedly change the fashion trends to fit your packaging. He focused his efforts on the Green Ball, which was a social event and a charity ball focused at the high women and elite societies. This ball was held at the Waldorf Astoria, and famous women would be attending this event wearing green dresses. Bernays latched onto this idea to promote green, and he even hyped up the excitement of the green theme and encouraged newspapers and magazines to attend. By doing this, women were all of a sudden interested in the colour green out of seemingly nowhere, and all of a sudden Lucky Strike's green and red packaging fit the fashion trends at the time. World War II also played a major role in promoting smoking habits. With World War II and all the men going off to war, women were seen to step into their roles and be equal in that sense. They would go and work in factories and were seen to sort of have to step into the shoes of men and act the part. Cigarette companies such as Chesterfield used cigarettes to promote women's participation in World War II. On top of that, Adolf Hitler also very publicly condemned smoking. He said he regretted smoking in an earlier life. He said that smoking was dirty for women. He also said it wasn't very manly for men to smoke because it's just a waste of money and you're not being the provider of the family if you're just spending all your money on smoking. The Nazi Party actually had a very strong anti-smoking movement and even funded a lot of their own research into the dangers of smoking. With the Nazi Party's reluctance to smoke, American tobacco companies leaned into this by claiming that Germans' research into the dangers of smoking was a load of nonsense and that true Americans should carry on smoking smoking to stick it to the enemy. Big Tobacco had a big problem on its hands, and that was that as science advanced, it was becoming increasingly more difficult to hide the dangers of smoking. Instead of coming clean, tobacco companies used every trick under the sun to manipulate the public, including manipulating medical reports and even bribing doctors. Cigarette companies knew that ultimately people trusted the idea of a doctor. To get the public on board with smoking, they needed to get doctors on board with smoking. Doctors are human beings too. At the end of the day, a doctor isn't any more immune to the effects of addiction than your average Joe. And boy, tobacco companies knew it. In the early 20th century, many physicians still doubted that there was a genuine connection between smoking and disease. They believed that smoking only caused harm in certain individuals and it was just a factor at play. So therefore, they were treating the link between smoking and diseases such as lung cancer as a sort of case-by-case scenario and not a direct correlation. In 1930, Lucky Strikes made the claim that 20,679 physicians say that Luckies are less irritating on an ad with a smiling doctor offering a packet of cigarettes. Before they conducted the survey, they hired an advertising firm called Lord Thomas and Logan to mail cartons of cigarettes to doctors over 3 years. Along with this was a survey asking the doctors whether Lucky Strikes are less irritating to sensitive and tender throats than other cigarettes. In this way, they kind of bribed the doctors. They acted subliminally to, push an agenda amongst doctors. They changed the wording from what they asked the doctors to what they then said the doctors said to the general public. And of course, they brought in company loyalty with these doctors, having given them cigarettes for so many years. Maybe they didn't even try other cigarettes during that time. Cigarette companies like R.J. Reynolds also participated in medical conventions by sponsoring doctors' lounges and giving away free cigarettes. One in particular was their line Caramels. They were then able to make the claim that their findings show that doctors smoke more Caramels than any other brands, conveniently leaving out the fact that they smoke more because they're given more for free. The idea is that with tactics like this, the public will see doctors smoking and think, oh, okay, for doctors smoking that particular brand, maybe that brand is less harmful than other brands that I hear about causing harm. And even more so, if doctors are smoking and they advise on health all day long, then maybe smoking can't be as bad for you as they say. It does make me wonder if things like this still happen to this day. I mean, this campaign made me instantly think of a certain dental hygiene company, and I won't name them, but they use lines such as dentists use more of this brand than any other brand. And I'm not saying that dentists were bribed by these companies to use their products. It may just be that this company is way better than anything that's on the market, but it does make me look at all of the advertisements I see in another light. Despite Big Tobacco's best efforts and self-funded studies to prove that the effects of smoking tobacco isn't that harmful, eventually research by independent scientists brought the truth to light and it became pretty difficult to ignore. Prior to World War I, lung cancer was an extremely rare disease and most physicians never saw it for the entirety of their career. After the war, lung cancer was on the rise, which prompted investigations into the cause. In 1929, a German scientist published a formal study that showed that lung cancer sufferers were likely to be smokers, and he also argued that this was the best way to explain why lung cancer struck 4 times more often in men than women, as women smoked a lot less at the time. But because of what I've mentioned earlier, at the time a lot of German studies were forgotten, disregarded, or just deliberately ignored. British epidemiologist Sir Richard Dole published research in the British Medical Journal that showed a close link between smoking and lung cancer. He believed that there might be new materials coming out into the world that were strongly causing lung cancer. His initial beliefs were that it might be due to new car fumes or new materials used in tarmac in the road. He studied patients of lung cancer and was trying to work out what common materials or what common substances they had all been exposed to that might have led to lung cancer. He found that tobacco smoking was ultimately the only common factor that they all had in common, and these findings actually led Dole to quit smoking himself. He was also one of the first to make the link between asbestos and lung cancer, and if you're not new to this channel, you know that I just find it so fascinating that asbestos was a huge industry cover-up and that people knew the dangers of it and yet exposed their workers to asbestos because it was just like a multi-million-dollar industry and they just did not care about the harm of workers or their end customers at the end. I just find it so fascinating. So yeah, I was quite chuffed to find out that Sir Richard Dole was involved in, one of my most mentioned conspiracy theories on this channel. So yeah, special shout out there as well. Though Dole's findings led to the common knowledge nowadays that smoking is bad for you, his findings weren't so embraced by everyone globally. In an interview with Anna Wagstaff, Dole recalls his experience of how the tobacco industry reacted to his revolutionary findings. He said, "What you've got to remember is that the directors of the tobacco companies in the 1950s were responsible people, insofar the directors of any firm were, and they were horrified by the idea that what they were selling was killing people. They made serious efforts to disprove the claim, but their own statistical advisor after a few years told them that it was a waste of time, and he was convinced that smoking caused lung cancer. I remember he rang me up and he said that he agreed with my findings and that he was going to have to leave his job. He wanted to take the opportunity of his final 2 weeks of expense allowance to invite me and my wife out for dinner. As it happened, his employers accepted his advice and he agreed to continue working for them on the basis that they would never publicly deny that smoking caused lung cancer." He then goes on to explain that directors in the tobacco industry nowadays are working under a completely different premise and that they go into it knowing quote unquote perfectly well that what they are selling is lethal. He also explained that the tobacco industry in America did not react too well to his news either. He explained that anyone that tried to go up against the tobacco industry, whether that is the general public or other companies, were met with very wealthy groups of well-prepared lawyers. The tobacco industry made it so expensive to raise objections and that the impacts of this have lasted a very long time. To my knowledge, no whistleblower going up against big tobacco has had it as difficult as Jeffrey Wigand. He was an American biochemist and former vice president of research and development at the tobacco company Brown and Williamson. I watched a really interesting film the other day. I was researching for this topic. It's called The Insider, which goes into detail about Jeffrey's story and his experience standing up against big tobacco. It stars Russell Crowe, and honestly guys, this is my favourite Russell Crowe performance to date. He played it so well. Wiggin was hired by Brown and Williamson to act as a researcher into what chemicals they put into their cigarettes, because at this time the tobacco industry was seen as really caring for their customers and they wanted to demonstrate a certain duty of care that they had to make sure what they were making wasn't too harmful for the public. His philosophy, and I am paraphrasing here, but it was along the lines of, people are going to smoke anyway, whether or not they're smoking our cigarettes or someone else's. If they are going to be smoking, then it may as well make sense for us to develop a cigarette that isn't harmful and is a safer option. He thought he was going to be studying the effects of carcinogenics and nicotine in the company's cigarettes, which was something that he was under the impression had never been done before in the company, and he was doing brand new revolutionary work. His research led him to find that the high-ranking corporate executives were approving additives in their cigarettes which were known to be carcinogenic and or addictive. When he flagged to his bosses that they were putting harmful chemicals in their cigarettes, he was basically told to shut up. And furthermore, he also noticed that his findings were deliberately not being recorded by the company. He struggled with the notion that he was working for a business that was knowingly causing harm on its customers, which ultimately led him to being fired from a job that gave him over $300,000 a year in salary and perks. In 1995, he was subpoenaed to testify in the state's lawsuit against 13 major tobacco companies known as Big Tobacco. The lawsuit went ahead because it was thought that Big Tobacco was deliberately ignoring signs that tobacco was causing harm to its customers, and ultimately the state had to spend funds to treat the customers' illnesses. After appearing in court, where he revealed that not only were cigarettes harmful but that tobacco companies were knowingly making their cigarettes more addictive, he appeared on CBS News' programme 60 Minutes in 1996. He claimed that Brown and Williamson had intentionally manipulated their tobacco with chemicals such as ammonia to increase the effects of nicotine in a cigarette smoke. Obviously, the more addictive a substance is, the more you use it, and the more you use a harmful substance, the more harm it causes. Wigand had to go through a crazy ordeal to testify and go up against Big Tobacco. Not only did he use any sense of, personal security and income from all this story, he was also given anonymous death threats, the culprit of which has still never been identified to this day. This single story also caused a lot, and I mean a lot, of chaos on the inside of CBS News. CBS News was in the middle of a sale to the corporation Westinghouse. After Brown and Williamson threatened to sue CBS News if they aired the story of Wingard on 60 Minutes, Eric Cluster, the president of CBS News, decided not to air the show after all. CBS producer Lowell Bergman caught wind of the fact that the story he was working so hard on wasn't going to be aired after all. Bergman was understandably fuming at Cluster and accused him of putting his journalistic integrity on the line and sacrificing the very message that CBS News stood behind and was built upon, which was exposing relevant and shocking stories to the public. And he also accused Cluster of going against public interest in order just to line his own back pockets and benefit financially from the sale. Wigand also found out that the story was going to be canned, and understandably he was really fuming, and he took this out on Bergman and he accused him of manipulating him to get a story out. Eventually though, the truth and good will prevail, and CBS, they did a 180 and they decided to air the story after all. Wigand's former boss, Thomas Sandifer, actually stood up in court in a previous lawsuit, and he claimed under oath that he believes that nicotine is not addictive. But Wigand does not believe in their lack of knowledge, and he just basically came on 60 Seconds and said, you know, my former boss lied under oath. Not only does he accuse his former company of using addictive substances such as nicotine, but deliberately manipulating the ingredients to make the nicotine more addictive by using the likes of ammonia.
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
He describes the penny-dropping moment when he realised what he was really hired to do, and that is to work on a nicotine delivery device. And not only a delivery device, but one which was designed to purposely increase the effects of nicotine, making it even more addictive than usual.
We're in a nicotine delivery business.
And that's what cigarettes are for.
Most certainly. It's a delivery device for nicotine.
A delivery device for nicotine. Put it in your mouth, light it up, and you're going to get your fix.
You get your fix.
So what does the future hold for big tobacco? I mean, is there any future at all? Public opinion of smoking cigarettes has pretty much done a 180. We went from physicians recommending smoking back in the day to it's now sort of seen as almost counterintuitive if a doctor smokes at all. Nowadays, tobacco companies legally aren't allowed to deny the harms that smoking causes. In fact, they actually have to plaster it in huge advertising and huge fonts at the top of all of their products. The tobacco industry is doing what it can to continue to stay afloat, I guess. Vaping nowadays is seen as the healthy, okay, maybe I'll reword that, the lesser of the two evils in compared to smoking. But now, and this is only my personal opinion, I'm not too convinced of this either. I mean, vapes haven't been around as long as, you know, cigars and cigarettes have been around. You see how long it took for the harms of those products to eventually come to light. What's to say that the research just doesn't exist yet for the harms of vaping? And also, again, this is only my own personal opinion, but I'm not convinced that vaping isn't in fact aimed at children all over again. I mean, you can't explicitly go out and advertise to children anymore, but it does seem to be doing a full circle, you know, getting them hooked young again, because, don't know about you, the flavours of the vapes nowadays, it just seems to appeal to children, and the packaging as well. What person who has been a lifelong smoker, I don't know, in their 50s or their 40s is drawn to flavours like gummy bear? I don't know. It's just food for thought and my own personal opinion, and it's all alleged. Cannot stress that enough. Thank you, Big Tobacco. Do not come for me today. So I hope, yeah, this video has provided you in some insight. I mean, I learned so much researching this video. It really blew my mind, and it has made me look at actually every single product that is out there in a complete new light. What's real, what's not. I can tell you now that this is not going to be the last conspiracy theory focused video in the health industry. I'm actually kind of behind the scenes working on doing a little iceberg video of all the different healthcare businesses and all the lies that the healthcare industry has told us over the years. I had to pick a starting point, and I thought that this one was pretty interesting, so I hope you have enjoyed. Do let me know in the comments if there's anything else you think I have missed out in this video, and if there's any topics that you would like me to cover soon. If you're not new here, you know I cover the likes of conspiracy theories quite often, because yeah, I enjoy filming these types of videos and I always learn something. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.